Today's episode is all about genetic data. You know, the stuff that makes you you. It's the building blocks of your identity, your ancestry, and maybe even your future health. But what happens when your DNA isn't just science? It's a commodity, a product that can be bought, sold, or even auctioned off if a company goes bankrupt. My name is Ellie Davis. This is Data Darling.
The genetic testing company 23andMe has filed for bankruptcy, and its potential sale has raised alarms about what could happen to the DNA data of its millions of users.
23andMe was founded in 2006 to provide accessible genetic testing. It grew relatively quickly, getting a $3.9 million investment from Google in its second year of business. 23andMe allowed you to do all sorts of things like get your blood work, test for STDs, and the popular ancestry test. There was even a What Would You Do segment where one of these genetic tests revealed that a young girl's father might not be biologically related to her at all. While this Maury-like incident did happen relatively often in real life, the pop culture phenomenon lived on and shot yet another Silicon Valley darling up to unimaginable heights. In 2021, 23andMe went public through an acquisition by Virgin Group, a company known for its flashy branding rather than its long-term development of its acquisitions. That's why only 4 years later, they're filing for bankruptcy. Late last year, the Private Equity Stakeholder Project reported that private equity firms played a role in 11 of the 17 corporate bankruptcies that occurred during the first 6 months of 2024. When a restaurant or retail store files for bankruptcy, they can attempt to scale down and sell off inventory to try and leverage lighter books as a reason to stay around for just a bit longer. While shipping boxes of inventory to outlet warehouses may work out for the big box stores, it may be a bit concerning to see bundled genetic family data available for sale. But what should the 10 million users who had their genetic data genotyped with the company expect to happen with their data? There's a strong possibility a line is already out the door to snatch up a bundle of genetic information that's already interpreted. But we'll come back to that a little later in this episode. Back to the facts of the bankruptcy. On March 21st, the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, issued a consumer alert encouraging users to lean on California's robust privacy laws. It allows consumers to take control and request that a company delete their genetic data. I see this consumer alert as a bit of a self-soothing tactic, seeing as I've never seen a company in the middle of going under that's particularly focused on operating by the books in its final days. While a lot of discussions around 23andMe will, and should, be centered around consumer and business law violations, there is no doubt that 23andMe internally considers itself a research-first facility. They just simply offer a convenient consumer product to collect samples for their lab. Your results in a colorful and legible infographic is the equivalent of that $25 gift card being offered to patients of clinical trials that get posted around college campuses. It means a lot to you, but you don't really have much, do you? Graham Laurie, a professor and lawyer with a focus in medical law, said this in his book Genetic Privacy. A number of public interest can also be furthered through judicious use of genetic information. The research value of genetic samples and information derived from them is axiomatic, but the achievement of this end requires a delicate balance between, on the one hand, gaining access to the samples and information, and on the other hand, ensuring that research subjects are respected and protected from harm. including, in particular, endangerment of their privacy. 23andMe's legal battle is still being written, but let's take a look at how some other cases defending genetic information and even selling it have played out. IVF has helped millions of families grow since its inception. Many families have embryos, defined as an egg that has been successfully fertilized with sperm, that exist in cryogenic freezers. Working on this episode has me thinking a lot about how far the law can and will stretch itself to protect data, and also, where do data rights end and human rights begin? You can be both an asset and a human before even taking a breath on this earth. Truly a new step for humankind. To explore this question, I want to discuss a custody battle in Texas like we've never seen before. Gabby and Carolyn Antoun had been married for 5 years before they began IVF treatments in 2019. Throughout their fertility journey, the couple was able to successfully fertilize 14 eggs. 3 eggs were implanted into Carolyn. 2 of those eggs resulted in live births, with 1, sadly, ending in a miscarriage. After 3 long rounds of trying for children, the couple was left with 7 embryos, 3 of which were in a cryogenic storage at the Dallas Fertility Clinic. Before starting treatments, the couple signed a document titled Consent Form, Cryopreservation of Embryos. The form asks who gets primary custody of the embryos in the event of a divorce. Both parties agree that the embryos are to be at the disposition of the husband. Again, this form was consensually signed by both parties. Eventually, in 2022, the two file for divorce and begin the work of splitting assets. In both parties' documents, there is only reference to their 2 born children when discussing custody and asset allocation, never the embryos in storage. Once a mediated settlement agreement is filed, their trial begins to determine once and for all who actually has custody over these embryos. Gabby's lawyers have introduced the consent form as evidence. Carolyn argues that she wasn't aware what she was signing. She didn't want to give up custody of her unborn children. Her lawyers use reproduction laws that were introduced after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Using the definition of unborn child in the Texas Health and Safety Code, they retain that the state of Texas had already sided with them. Case closed. The Antoun custody battle reveals how easily genetic material can be treated as an asset rather than a human right. Now, what does this case have to say about how the U.S. may be viewing genetic assets? Well, for one, your genetic data can easily be signed away from you without you ever noticing. America, land of the legal battle, loves a form. A form is a legally binding contract packaged as something that you can sign quickly to get it out of your face. There are often big decisions on the other side of those easily checked boxes. In the case of this genetic custody battle, the husband was able to claim rights to his potential children inadvertently. The wife had no legal rights, the same as if she went to court and signed away her rights like an adoption. It's hard not to assume that I should look at any medical form going forward as a potential agreement to print my clone and put it to work. It seems unrealistic now, but everything has the potential to shift to fair and reasonable use any day now.
Co-fertility is a new fertility ecosystem that gives women the opportunity to freeze their eggs for free when they donate half of the eggs retrieved to intended parents that can't otherwise conceive. So people who struggle with infertility, gay dads, cancer survivors, and more.
That was Co-Fertility co-founder Lauren Mackler. And yeah, you heard that right. You can store your eggs for free. In addition to the donation option that Co-Fertility calls their split plan, you can also choose the keep plan that allows you to store with them for drastically cut prices without giving up any of your eggs. On average, freezing your eggs costs anywhere from $8,000 to $30,000 for each round, And that's before you factor in the cost of storing those eggs. A consumer offering like this tugs on the heartstrings. You're not only taking charge of your future, you're also helping all of mankind. Initially, I was thinking, gosh, I have never seen anything like this before. But the longer I sat with it, the more I wondered if organ donation would be legally comparable. The biggest difference I noticed between a nonprofit medical donation and a for-profit medical donation structure is the promises that co-fertility peppers throughout its messaging. Co-fertility promises that if anything outside of your control prevents you from coming home with a live baby, your fertility journey is free. If you get a heart transplant, a doctor would never promise you that it'll take and that you'll live forever. The medical field interacts with so many unknown factors, it's alarming that co-fertility would make that claim. I'm not saying that they don't do their due diligence to create a safe and fulfilling journey for expecting parents. I'm just saying consumer promises don't always mesh well with the realistic way that healthcare works. And that brings us back to 23andMe and the problem that so many eHealth startups are facing. Where is the line between serving the patient and serving the investors? eHealth companies are not required to take the Hippocratic Oath. There is no obligation to do right or even decent by the patients you interact with. And no matter what, at some point, the online healthcare bubble they built for themselves can be bought up at a moment's notice. That brings us back to 23andMe and the problems so many eHealth startups are facing. Where is the line between serving the patient and serving the investors? eHealth companies are not required to take the Hippocratic Oath. There's no obligation to do right or even decent by the patients you interact with. In a 2012 report from the World Health Organization, they had this to say about healthcare law. The role of law in healthcare is, among other things, to ensure that the ethical principles of autonomy, beneficence, and justice are translated into practice, and to provide a framework in which any failure to implement the duties that arise from those ethical principles may be addressed. That is, to create a realm of legal certainty in which healthcare may be practiced. I like this definition and purpose behind healthcare law, but can the direct-to-consumer genetic testing industry reasonably be classified as healthcare? I'm going to immediately answer that hypothetical and say no. They are all still specifically and deliberately classified as tech companies because tech companies are still benefiting from early internet courting by Clinton and Gore all the way back in the 90s. No matter what industry these companies are focused on, their regulation will stay focused on data, seeing as that's tech's main moneymaker, therefore the main regulating body. So, how do your DNA samples become data? First, you send in a DNA sample. That extraction is the first step, turning your DNA code into genetic material. It's being prepared for analysis here. Next, that genetic material is read and turned into genetic information. It is only considered information when it can be interpreted by someone else, going from what it is to what it means. Once that genetic information is interpreted, it gets paired back up with your direct and indirect identifiers provided at registration. Things like your name, address, date of birth, and even a medical record if you've allowed your doctor to have access to your information via 23andMe. Now that your DNA is merely data, the legal loopholes begin. In privacy policies, your consent is contingent on personhood. What does that mean? If that data is unidentifiable, meaning it can't be reasonably connected to an identifiable trait like your name, address, or social security number, then it's subjected to much less regulation. So here are 3 things that I would like to come from the 23andMe bankruptcy. I know it's still in action. I know we really haven't heard much since the bankruptcy was announced, but I do think it would be a really amazing time for, yes, the US, but kind of everyone to really take a look at these services and learn how we would like to go forward. So here's what I would like in negotiations. I would like definitions and legal standards for de-identified data. My name being removed or data like my zip code being stored in a range rather than the specific number is not adequate data protections. I believe that direct identifiers should never be stored with genetic data. Separate softwares or some sort of encryption should be required for even the average employee to connect the two bits of data together. Next, I want legislation for mergers and acquisitions concerning eHealth companies. I think people who have their genetic data in these companies should be able to vote like stockholders and have a say in who owns their data. I understand the power of a genetic bank. I don't believe that it should disappear with the dying company. It's insanely valuable, but that's exactly why there should be laws protecting it. And that's exactly why you, someone who consented to one company owning it, should have a say if another company gets the chance to own it. And lastly, I'd like to empower an agency. With any legislation, there must be an agency responsible for maintaining it. Now, I'll be honest on air, I'm not really sure what that looks like specifically yet. In my head, it should be something like the FCC and maybe another health organization, because it's a consumer issue, but it's also a health issue. It is really both. Maybe another smaller agency that kind of pulls people from both sides and has them talk to each other, because it's truly a new industry. It's a new issue, but it's an issue that will continue to persist. And that persistence isn't bad, but it can be treated while we're at closer to the beginning of the issue. This episode highlights the urgent need for new laws to protect genetic privacy and human rights. Reach out to your representatives and demand legislation that defines how genetic data should be handled during mergers, acquisitions, or bankruptcies. Together, we can push for transparency and accountability in the eHealth industry. Thank you for listening. My name is Ellie Davis. And remember, when in doubt, follow the data.